CRO of KinectAir. I live in Eugene. You're going to meet some of the rest of the crew that's here. I'm a startup person by nature, and so is my husband, and I believe in the company that we're about to start and really get off the ground here, or I wouldn't have given up everything else I had to come here. That's what this is about, is to do something big and have purpose. So now, our CEO and co-founder, Jonathan Evans, is going to tell you his story and what we're about to do with KinectAir. Jonathan Evans.
Thank you, Celeste. Thank you. Thank you, children, for being so enthusiastic. Yes, thank you all for being here. This is a surprise and a great honor to see so much enthusiasm for really, I guess, the next chapter in my own personal story and the next chapter and hopefully a lot of yours as well. And I've been mingling with a few of you so far and realized that as much as I'm a little tired of hearing my own story myself, I think it's fair to kind of catch a few of you up to speed as to kind of why are we at this junction today, and why are we starting something new and celebrating it. So yeah, I started my career in the United States Army in 1997. I was very privileged after being enlisted to get selected for the U.S. Army Warrant Officer Flight Program, which is basically the only thing I understood at the time was as long as you could pass a test, you didn't need a college degree to fly a military aircraft. And I thought, well, all right, I'll drop out of college and do that. So I was very fortunate to get picked up for that program, and I ended up flying Blackhawks, UH-60 Sikorsky Blackhawks for about 7-8 years of the full 9, and I met a few of you guys out there. Any Blackhawk drivers out there? There's at least one. I know Connor, our chief pilot, is also a Blackhawk driver. Oh, sorry, Chinook pilot. He flew bigger helicopters. So I got out of the military in 2006 and started my first company in real estate development in 2006. So if you guys remember 2006, you might know that wasn't the best timed thing to do when you first got out of the military, but it did teach a certain amount of humility. I'd never crashed an aircraft, but I did crash that company pretty good into 2008. And it got me back into flying again, thank goodness. Went up to Alaska, flew in Alaska for a while, helicopters mainly. I also fly airplanes for fun here and there. And then came back down here and was flying for Life Flight in Eugene, Oregon. And Celeste is the first one to mention Eugene, but Eugene is very much a theme in a lot of these stories you'll see. Woo! And I was flying Life Flight in Eugene, Oregon when I decided to go to the MBA by day and kind of start doing night shifts as a Life Flight pilot out of the fire station there, and started a company called Skyward and sort of started incubating it in the MBA. Skyward turned out to have some early success and enough to kind of get me to drop out of school again. And I decided to leave the MBA and start Skyward and moved up to Portland. So Skyward really did start in Eugene, but it's truly a Portland success. We were able to raise about $8 million of venture capital, Silicon Valley and Voyager Capital based in Seattle mainly, were our main investors. And very fortunate to, and Skyward is a drone software company, drone operations management. Basically all of the things I knew as a sort of analog, kind of dumb helicopter pilot, we put into like a TurboTax-like software to make sure that enterprises, large companies can employ drones, and you can probably see drones are a thing that are being employed more and more. So that was a good play, and we were very fortunate to sell that company in February 2017 to Verizon. Yes. Thank you for leading the slow clap there. And it was a success. It was it was an investor success, I'll say. We're trained never to say the numbers, but it was an investor success, I'm very, very happy to say. But most importantly, it's a success for the project that we set out to build there, in that we were able to install a kernel of innovation and intelligence in the scale of the Fortune 12 company. And you can see that division now going from being acquired. We were at about 25 heads of software engineers for the most part, and sales folks that are selling that to enterprises. And now that division, with the CEO's backing himself from Verizon, and under the noble leadership of Mariah Scott, its president now, is going from about 80 heads, I believe, and moving on to about 120. So Verizon has seriously doubled down on the investment in the little innovation project that we started up here in the Pacific Northwest. And that's why I wanted to share that story with you before I got to the one that we're starting here today. I got to spend, those last 7 years going from being a pilot with an idea that showed up and said, hey, I think we ought to organize some of these infrastructure and software a little bit, kind of a geeky pilot look at it. I went through 7 years and kind of became a businessman, quite honestly, by the grace and the goodness by some major mentors that actually worked for me as the CEO of that company. I'm grateful to have been taught, a few of the rules of the road at this point in business. And then in the last year at Verizon, after we were acquired, I had this crazy trip of a job where I became the vice president of global aviation policy for Verizon. And all of a sudden, I went from being like a small businessman and an entrepreneur to being a global executive. And I'm sitting across the table at, this is going to sound a little name droppy, but we're at NASA, boom. And I'm sitting next to the associate administrator of NASA for aeronautics. That's the first A in NASA, boom. And we're sitting next to the other guy, the chief engineer for Boeing and for GE. And then we have Uber and Google. And we have a lot of people that you would consider the sort of chiefs of industry in aviation. And I'm this young guy that was just a helicopter pilot with a good idea that gets to sit at that table. And so I realized that it was time to end that chapter and to start the next one. And I think I probably had KinectAir before it had a name in my head since the first time I ever flew people. And I saw what it was like to share the lore and the majesty and the freedom and the pure joy of flying. I think we've lost that. I tried to capture it again by going into drones to get aviation as geeky as possible and make it like a flying network and to get really inspired that way. And that's somewhat inspiring, but honestly, it's much more inspiring to have any one of you sitting next to me and to fly past the sisters on our left and to see you try to capture that moment in a picture. And to try to share it later, because you can't. It's just too beautiful. It's too marvelous. And that never gets old to me. In over 20 years of flying to me, I always enjoy it. And I want to share that joy with everybody here. I want to share that joy with everybody I possibly can. And that's where KinectAir comes from. So what is KinectAir? A few people have asked me that question in mingling as well. Well, KinectAir is a truly on-demand, app-based, personal air charter service for real people going to real places. It's that simple. Air service today, personal on-demand air charter service, literally serves a 0.1% demographic. So very few of us have ever experienced this freedom and liberation, this capability to actually put air service into the palm of your hand and say, I want to go here at this time to this place on my schedule and exactly where I want to go. And so we're fundamentally a team of 8 right now, a profoundly intelligent, tenacious, professional leadership team that spans professional aviation. We're building a real aviation company that's a real aircraft out there that you can get on, and there are real captains that you can meet here today with tens of thousands of hours of experience behind them that you can trust. Fundamentally, I want you to trust this brand as much as you do Delta or United starting today. And you should. We're that safe. And we're an order of magnitude cooler, better, more adventurous, and a better service than you could possibly hope for from the airlines today. Because fundamentally, I see that people see in the aviation system a sort of entrapment these days of anything. They feel trapped by the schedule, feel trapped by the location, feel trapped by the queues that you have to go through and the security measures that you have to take that feel a lot like theater. When fundamentally, aviation is liberation. It should be freedom. It should be in your hands. It should be there to empower you to move where and when you want in space and time. And we're making old new again, because that used to be how people felt about aviation. People used to dress up to go fly. People used to swarm the Wright brothers 10 years into them flying longer distances and landing somewhere. It was an event. It was something to be admired. And I still think every time I take my kids across this continent in 6 hours, that's a bit of a miracle, and it should be recognized as one. So hopefully, we'll be able to bring you into that experience and start to feel that lore and that majesty and fundamentally that empowerment, be able to put this into your hands. I want to finish by introducing the leadership team of KinectAir and have them stand up. And then I'll open up for a few questions that you may have of me while I've got the podium, and then you can ask questions of all these folks afterwards. So we started with CRO, Chief Revenue Officer Celeste Edmond, who has really put together this entire event, and let's give you a round of applause for that, for sure. Carrie Schwerd, if you could please stand up. She leads finance for us. Connor Whitehead, he is our Chief Pilot and Director of Operations. Ben, possibly Philip Howard, where is he? Ben, he is our CTO. And when we say that this is an air service that has software in its soul, I'll watch my mouth. It really is. It really is. Ben is a magnificent technical leader and comes from a big data machine learning AI, ag company that's going to be solving the hard problems of dispatch and moving these aircraft around dynamically in space and time. Who else do I have here? Peter Lucier. Where's Peter Lucier, our Chief Operating Officer? Is he still wrangling? Oh, there he is. Yeah. Did I miss anyone? Natty. And Jonathan Nadiuk, Creative Director, Design, I don't know what we say. The guy that is responsible for all of the beautiful depictions you can see, and I should mention that they are this artist's rendition of what our aircraft liveries will look like. I don't know if you added up that one's not painted that way just yet. But you are all here at the actual inception of this air service. We don't call it an airline. Just like Reed Hastings, when he came out with Netflix, told us, you're not going to have agenda programming anymore. You're not going to meet your TV set at a certain time, at a certain place for it to serve the media to you that it has decided. You will instead have on-demand media, high definition streaming to your house. Well, we're introducing you to on-demand air service. This is not an airline. Airlines are set in space. There are fixed points and fixed routes in time. And they're served to you in the way that the airlines expect. We're here to give you the on-demand artisanal air service that you ultimately expect and deserve. And so please, meet people one-on-one that are from the team. And what's that? Screens? Oh yeah, and if you'll check out what we're sort of running on these screens here, this is the first 90-second video that we have on the website, and also a depiction of the very prototype user experience in the app product that we'll be putting in your hands. By the end of this event, we would like to sign up 30 people. So there are way more than you here than can do this, but 30 people, our first 30 people for beta travelers. We're not open for business to the public yet. We're going to keep this very, very tightly controlled and safe, ultimately. We're not just trying to do this as fast as we possibly can. We're trying to do this right. So we're going to open up the service on a Pilatus and a Cirrus starting in about a month here to about 30 people in a closed beta service. And that's fundamentally why we invited you here today. Fundamentally, we're trying to get the first 30 people that want to feel like they're going to start putting us on demand. Go ahead, do it. Go meet Connor and start ordering him around if you want to. Start telling him to move from here to here. See what it feels like. And then there are other opportunities to participate in KinectAir. Our fleet is actually owned by others in a fractional ownership service. So if you happen to be one of the rare birds that would like to own an aircraft or a fraction of an aircraft, you could talk to us about that as well. And then, of course, we are always open for anybody that wants to share this story. And Celeste is obviously doing a great job of giving us the materials that we need to tell this story. And if anybody wants to help us continue to magnify that, please talk to her or myself about it as well. So I'll open up for maybe just questions from you guys right now real quick, and then we'll go to mingling again. John. How does it differ from Netjets? Yeah, so, we take a lot of plays from a lot of good playbooks, and I'm going to give a tip of the hat to Netjets for being one of the first fractional aircraft ownership and really on-demand services that got put together. But, fundamentally, that's that 0.1% demographic still. Those jets are expensive, whether you do them in fractions or not, and they're expensive to operate, and they have enormous environmental impacts, and they have a whole lot of sort of brute force technology sitting in them. So that's our fundamental difference. We're in aircraft that look a lot like Priuses. In a lot of ways, they're super efficient. state of the art. They're the safest aircraft in the sky, especially when flown by captains like Connor and the guys and the gals that he's going to train. And so, you know, if you look at charter jet services, just by the economics, if anybody wants to actually do it by math, charter jet services sit at about $10 to $15 to $20 even a seat mile, a loaded seat mile. So if the aircraft is loaded up, it costs about $10 for every mile that you go in a seat, right? These aircraft we're approaching price points of about $1.50 to $2 a seat mile. So if we load up the Cirrus with 3 adults, or we load up that Pilatus with 8 adults, then a mile only costs you $1.50 or $2. So if you go 500 miles down to the Bay Area, that's $750 in a loaded aircraft. It's an order of magnitude less than Netjets, order of magnitude. So we're looking at a price point that we say we're democratizing personal on-demand air charter services. We are. We're going from 0.1% demographic that can afford them today to about an upper quartile. Yeah, and you know, also it's a 20, 30-year-old company, John, and no disrespect to people that have been running companies for 20 or 30 years, but you know, this is an air service that has just as much steep tradition of appropriate, safe, robust aircraft operations, but software in its soul, right? Like, I haven't seen any company build an air service with real software, not one yet. So that's another differentiator. Yeah. Luke?
How does the gas mileage compare?
Gas mileage, yeah. So in the Cirrus, when I trim it out, let's say you're just going over to Sisters or Sun River or Bend, any of them. Once you get up to about 9,000 feet, which is kind of where you got to get to cross over the pass there, you trim it out, you lean it out, you say, because you're at higher altitude, there's less oxygen. So you have to use less fuel or else you're just blowing it out the back, out the tailpipe. Once you trim that out, you know, in, we'll say, a zero tailwind or headwind situation, you're approaching about 18 to 20 miles per gallon as 4 seats flying as the crow flies. So I'll take that over a Honda Civic any day as an environmental footprint for 4 people in it. Because, you know, driving over that pass is not as the crow flies, and you're pretty close to the same miles per gallon. The Pilatus is a little less, but again, sort of per seat mile, if we have a sort of a carbon footprint per seat, we're definitely, that's why I kind of compare it to the Prius. It's an order of magnitude, again, off of what you're using in traditional air service. So. And that's increasingly important. Greta's done a great job of, you know, pointing out, you know, the environmental impacts of aviation. And quite frankly, that should be in our value system now too, right? So we're addressing that. Sir, Jake.
There's an on-demand air company in California called Blackbird. Have you followed them? Or?
Sure. So Blackbird, Jake brings up another company and said there are about a dozen companies that look a little like us, depending on how you kind of deconstruct it and look at it. Blackbird would be the most obvious software version. Let me be gentle and kind and, you know, the corporate exec that I claimed I learned how to be. Blackbird is doing an irresponsible business model. As a professional aviator, I will tell you they're doing something irresponsible. Anybody who speaks aviation in here knows the term called operational control. The ability to move these aircraft in space with the pilots as trained to our standards and the aircraft as maintained to our standards, that's called operational control. And KinectAir is not avoiding it, if you will. We are fundamentally building an air service from the ground up with full operational controls. So we're maintaining these aircraft, we're training these pilots, we're moving them in time and space according to risk mitigation that makes sense and isn't just bottom line driven. What Blackbird is doing is literally putting a really nice software interface to customers like all of you to let you kind of rent any aircraft from anybody and rent an equally sort of Tom, Dick, and Harry pilot. And they're just barely, to the letter of the law, legal. Just barely. They're basically avoiding operational control. They're flying Part 91, yeah. Sorry, it gets a little wonky, but the idea that we really fundamentally believe that we want you to trust our service and therefore, you know, our pilots fundamentally, you know, that's sacred to me and Connor. You know, I flew Life Flight on demand with a crew of 2 every night. And, you know, I took that job very seriously. And I don't just see this as like a Silicon Valley-backed company that's looking to disrupt, an enormous industry. I see it as the next great generation of the industry that I come from and love, and that it's the best we could possibly do in aviation. And that includes holding the full sanctity of trusting our service with your life, fundamentally. And we add a little software and make it a lot sexier than anything you've ever seen on Delta or United, too. So, anybody else? Oh, wait, you already had one. Yes, sir.
What's your funding model?
Funding model?
Yeah.
So we've been self-funded up until recently. We've recently opened up a small private round to friends and investors that I've met along the road before. Yeah. Eventually we'll go talk to those sharks down there again, I guess. In all honesty, the fleet is a really nice thing to bank. It's a lot easier than just going down to Silicon Valley and trying to raise money for software. Like, software has no collateral against it. You can't, I had to go down to Silicon Valley last time and raise $8 million by saying I was gonna hire people and put them into a cave and feed them, shit until software came out. And they're like, yeah, we'll take that bet. It's the craziest bet in business, right? Possibly. This is a different bet. One, here's a fetishy concept for a guy who has been successful through Silicon Valley. We're gonna go into business profitably. Oh! The current strategy is to, the first time you guys buy a flight from us, it makes us money. Sorry. But yeah, it will. We're gonna be a profitable business from the outset, from the unit economic level. And it's a lot easier, in my experience, to raise capital when you're on your front foot making money already. And I'd be happy to potentially skip certain financiers this time and go to others. So, and and to the point, when you have collateralized debt in the fleet, it's a totally different bet. You can get operational capital in the mix there too. But the fleet being able to be banked is a totally different thing than building just a software company. So, John, yeah.
Can you opt for 2 pilots?
Opt for 2 pilots, yes, you asked me that, I like that. So one of the cost efficiencies of these aircraft, using these smaller format single engine aircraft, is that they're single pilot as well. Legally, and again, in our sacred, trusted, safe hearts, we trust senior pilots flying these aircraft with you around them, with my kids around them, with all your kids around them. Fundamentally, it's good to have another set of eyes up there, right? It is. And so we're not going to rely on having a 2-pilot aircraft where we say we're going to hire a pilot and co-pilot every single flight. But one of the programs that we're starting with is sort of like a Journeyman Program. So for more junior pilots, again, our brand is built off the seniority of our captains. You can trust Kinect because, just like you can trust any Delta flight, because it's the same captain, right? And they're just flying a very capable aircraft that's smaller and cheaper to fly around. And that's what makes it safe. But fundamentally, we want to be able to bring up our junior captains to that seat if we can. That'll take quite a few years, but we're going to have a sort of a journeyman or apprenticeship program where I envision having these commercially rated pilots being able to be a ground dispatch, serving paid shifts for us as an augmentee or co-pilot to multiple flying captains. Be able to make sure your lift driver's there on time when you end up at Truckee and you weren't able to make that last connection. We really are providing concierge service, so our co-pilots are kind of one-to-many on the ground kind of thing. But we're also going to give those gals the ability to come sit right seat and fly for free, so they can earn time basically with the captains next to them and start to gain that experience until they can move over to the left seat. And so I would give you the option to opt in with that that co-pilot for sure on the app. Susan.
Hi. So if I signed up today, could my kids tap in if I need the service, if they need the service in the future? How does that work in terms of becoming a member and part of the program?
Yeah, so there are basically 3 segments that we're going with right now. The first segment is just open to the public, and it isn't. There will, as I said, we'll choose 30 of you lucky beta travelers here today that be in that tier. You don't have any monthly commitment. There's no fee. There's no down payment. It's just take our first app and start using it. That's the commitment, and then pay for the flights. I mean, you got to buy the flights. The second tier is what we call our Adventurers Club. And the Adventurers Club is where we are putting the same on-demand service, but we're also packaging up some more advantageous destinations and sort of streamlined packages for the weekend. We're starting with the Kinect ski bus. And I don't know if we have anything formal to announce dates or anything yet, but those are the first seats that we're selling on that Pilatus. Through this winter, we're going to kind of do the on-demand thing by reserving that aircraft, the captain, making sure that we have 6 seats sold, and then the on-demand part is you're going to fly to the best ski conditions that weekend available in the West. And we're talking as far south as Telluride. So that's sort of the sort of game of it, and so those will be the first abilities to sign up in our Adventurers Club, basically. And the Pioneers Club is for aircraft owners. And I talked about them. They get the ultimate on-demand service. Obviously, basically, it's aircraft ownership as a service, everything that you would expect as an aircraft owner without any of the headaches. And I'm really not pitching that too strong here right now. But so fundamentally, when we move out of beta, anybody can download the app, and they can start putting aircraft on demand, fundamentally. And then we have these other segments for people that want more premium service. But that's a huge differentiator from the market today, too. Nobody's putting an app in your hand that you can transact to get one of those at your doorstep. And I mean it. Like, the reason we brought you here today is because this is like a 3,500-foot strip. This is a really small airfield, right? We're showing you how accessible the pores of the entire system are to you in our service. You can take that aircraft from here to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and hike down into it if you want to, right? This is truly artisanal on-demand services. Did I answer your question, Susan? So you have your kids definitely book flights often. Yeah. No, but only because we're controlling the demand side with beta. Yeah, and well, I don't know how long that's going to be, honestly. We have to be comfortable that we have supply covered to release the control on the beta, on the demand side. We're always going to have more demand than we do supply, I think, to some degree. I hope. That means that we're a wanted thing. So. But yeah, so there'll be a little bit of pacing there, but fundamentally the business model is to open up to the entire market on demand.
Hey, Mama, I want to sit right here.
Oh, it's probably the bell, actually. I think I know my kids indicate to me when it's time. Did anybody else have another question before I hop off and let you guys mingle a little bit? Bob Lloyd! What about helicopters? Those dirty, nasty, blue-collar things. Awful. Yeah, no, helicopters near and dear to my heart. Did you? Okay. Yeah, and you can see a lot of the other on-demand services. So like probably the biggest market maker right now in the category is Uber and Uber Elevate, and they're in service now in the Bay Area and in New York in helicopters, and they're still pretty expensive, right? They're still really only going after 1% demographic. Blade is another really good company in helicopters. Airbus, their company called Boom just went into service in the Bay Area in helicopters again. There is a whole sort of point-to-point notion that some folks are going after. I just think it's a little more expensive and not where we wanted to start. I think as we build a natural base of demand for where people want personal air mobility services, obviously the helicopters come in the mix. Obviously, this next generation of air taxis, these so-called air taxis, these VTOLs that you have Bell building the Nexus, you have Airbus building the Vahana, you have Boeing building an air taxi. These are all sort of new generation helicopters that I expect that this air service with software in its soul is perfectly adapted to managing that new generation of sort of robotic and electric aircraft. And buddy, we'd be happy to have you up until there are no pilots. Okay? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So I think that's going to be it for the Q&A with me up here. In terms of beta travelers, we want to funnel people over there that would like to sign up to do that. Okay. You're gonna do that. Okay. Okay. Because again, that's sort of like our bottom line here is we'd like to get 30 of you to sign up to start putting these things on demand for us. And we'll all go into business together and see how this goes. So finally, I'd like to actually thank the families of my co-founders. I can't think probably to name everybody at all, but I know I've got Rachel standing over there who just had a baby who added the newest family member, Roger, a 5, 6, 7 week old right there. in the KinectAir family. Yeah, I won't ask you all to stand up, but the families of co-founders, these guys are bootstrapping, right? Like, this is a profound leadership team, the finest I have ever worked with. And they're doing it on nights and weekends and early in the morning. And they put together this as the Hello World event without anybody getting paid a salary to do it. So that means thank you to their families. Please, a big round of applause to my co-founders' families. And I'd like to thank my family too, I guess, while I'm at it. My Isla and Arlo, they're probably gone, actually. Oh, they're all right. Well, thank you guys. You guys are amazing. They're out there playing on the airplane. And yeah, and really just want to invite you all to step forward with us into the sky, really, to try to embrace the lore of it again and find an alternative to how tired it maybe has become to fly around this country, because it isn't. It's majestic. It's magnificent. It's one of the most beautiful and liberating things you can possibly do, and every single one of us should be at our highest and most elevated form to do it. So that's why we're bringing you KinectAir. I hope that you'll continue to interact and get on that beta traveler list, and yeah, we'll see you up in the sky. Be on your way.
Jonathan, I'm going to tell you a couple housekeeping things. Ready? 2 computers as you exit. I told you no check-in, but there is check-out. There's 2 computers up there. They're touchscreen. If you're interested in anything Jonathan mentioned, please fill those in and push the submit button. Also, before you go, we have tote bags and t-shirts and stickers, you guys. Put those stickers on your water bottles. We know you all want them. But thank you for being here, and thank you again to Jonathan and our co-founding team. Before we go, thank you so much. How great is this venue? Isn't this so cool? Over 100 years old, Army, amazing. And our caterers and Divine Catering, who did a phenomenal job as well. So thank you, everyone.